There's a place in Cyprus where a luxury beach resort was abandoned almost overnight. Not because the sea swallowed it, not because the buildings collapsed, not because people slowly stopped coming. One day, Varosha was full of hotels, beaches, shops, apartments, restaurants, tourists, music, traffic, and summer life. And then, suddenly, it was empty. The lights went out, the streets fell silent, hotel rooms were left behind, balconies faced the sea with no guests standing on them. Shops that once sold clothes, souvenirs, food, and beach supplies were closed and never reopened. Cars stayed where they had been left. Furniture remained inside buildings. Curtains moved in the wind. And outside, one of the most beautiful beaches in the Mediterranean kept existing as if nothing had happened. The sea was still blue, the sand was still bright, the sun still rose over the coast, but the city beside it had become a ghost. This place is called Varosha. Before 1974, it was one of the most famous tourist areas in Cyprus, a modern seaside district of Famagusta, filled with hotels, apartment blocks, shops, and holiday life. It was a place built for pleasure, a place people came to escape ordinary life, a place where the future looked bright, rich, and glamorous. But after the events of 1974, the people of Varosha fled. Many believed they would return soon. They thought they were leaving for days, maybe weeks, maybe until the danger passed. But the return never came. Instead, Varosha was fenced off, closed, guarded, frozen. And for decades, it became one of the strangest abandoned places in the world. A beach resort trapped behind barriers, too political to restore, too valuable to forget, and too painful to simply leave in the past. This is the story of Varosha, the resort city abandoned overnight, a place where luxury turned into silence, a place where the sea kept shining beside empty hotels, and a place that still asks one haunting question. What happens when a city is not destroyed, but suspended in time? Before Varosha became a symbol of division, it was a symbol of confidence. It was part of Famagusta, on the eastern coast of Cyprus, facing a long stretch of beautiful Mediterranean beach. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Cyprus was becoming a powerful tourist destination. People wanted sun, warm water, modern hotels, beaches, nightlife, restaurants, a sense of escape. And Varosha gave them exactly that. It was not an ancient ruin. It was not a quiet old village. It was modern. It was alive. It was growing upward and outward. Hotels rose near the coastline. Apartment buildings looked toward the sea. Streets filled with cars, signs, shops, cafes, and holiday crowds. Tourists came for the beaches, the climate, the nightlife, and the feeling that this place was part of the future. Varosha was sometimes described as glamorous, a Mediterranean resort district with energy, money, movement, and ambition. For people visiting, it was a holiday dream. For the people who lived and worked there, it was something even more important. It was home. That is what is easy to forget when we look at abandoned places. A ruined hotel is not just a ruined hotel, it was once someone's workplace. A street was not just a street, it was where people walked to school, to work, to shops, to friends, to the sea. An apartment building was not just concrete and balconies. It was where people cooked, slept, argued, laughed, raised children, waited for family, and built ordinary lives. Varosha was not only tourism, it was also daily life. Behind the glamour, there were local families. There were hotel workers, shop owners, taxi drivers, teachers, children, neighbors. People who knew the streets before they became famous. People who lived beside the noise of summer visitors and the rhythm of the sea. And for a while, it must have felt as if the growth would never stop. New buildings, new hotels, new investment, new visitors, more rooms, more money, more attention. That is the seductive power of a boomtown. When the future is arriving quickly, people begin to believe it will keep arriving forever. And Varosha had that feeling. A place with momentum. A place that seemed too valuable to disappear. A place too alive to become empty. But history does not ask whether a city is ready. Sometimes it enters suddenly. And when it does, even the brightest places can go dark. In 1974, Cyprus changed. The island was already shaped by tension, identity, politics, and fear. Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots had lived through years of conflict and uncertainty. The situation was complicated, painful, and deeply human. Then, in the summer of 1974, events moved quickly. A coup took place in Cyprus. Turkey launched a military intervention. The island was divided. And in the middle of this larger conflict, Varosha became one of the places where ordinary life ended almost instantly. For the people there, the story was not an abstract geopolitical event. It was not a map. It was not a headline. It was the sound of fear getting closer. It was families leaving homes quickly. It was people deciding what to take and what to leave. It was the belief that this could not last forever. Many residents fled believing they would come back. That detail is what makes Varosha so painful. People did not leave as if they were abandoning their lives permanently. They left because they were afraid. They left because the situation was dangerous. They left because survival came first. But when people leave quickly, they do not empty a life. They do not pack everything. They do not clean every room. They do not say goodbye properly to every street. They leave food in kitchens, clothes in wardrobes, documents in drawers, furniture in living rooms, photographs on walls, beds unmade, balconies open to the sea. A city is not designed to be paused. Life is not designed to be interrupted mid-sentence. But that is what happened. Varosha did not slowly decay into abandonment. It was interrupted. A resort city in motion was suddenly frozen. Imagine a hotel where guests were expected to return to the lobby, but never did. Imagine a shopkeeper closing the door, thinking it might be temporary. Imagine a child leaving home without understanding that the house may never be entered again. Imagine a family looking back at the city from a road, believing that in a few days, maybe a few weeks, they would come back and continue their lives. But the city they left behind was sealed. The return became a promise that history did not keep. And Varosha entered the long silence. After 1974, Varosha became fenced off. It was no longer a normal city. It was no longer a functioning resort. It became a closed zone. A place people could see from a distance, but not freely enter. This is part of what makes Varosha so surreal. Most abandoned places are accessible because nobody cares enough to guard them. Varosha was different. It was abandoned and guarded, empty and controlled, silent and politically charged. The hotels were still there, the streets were still there, the beach was still there, but the life of the city was locked away. For decades, the buildings stood under the sun, facing the sea like frozen witnesses. Glass broke, concrete cracked, plants grew through streets and balconies. Metal corroded in the salty air, walls peeled, roofs weakened, shops faded. Hotels that had once represented luxury became skeletons of the tourist boom. And yet, Varosha did not feel like a normal ruin, because it was not abandoned by choice. It was not left because business failed. It was not emptied because the beach stopped being beautiful. It was emptied by conflict and kept empty by politics. That gives the place a different emotional weight. A closed amusement park feels eerie. An abandoned factory feels industrial and forgotten. A burned town feels tragic. But a sealed resort city feels like unfinished time. Everything about Varosha suggests interruption. A balcony waiting for a guest. A road waiting for traffic. A hotel waiting for music. A beach waiting for umbrellas. A shop waiting for customers. The city seems to say, life was supposed to continue here, but it did not. And this is why Varosha became famous far beyond Cyprus. Because it looks like a contradiction. A paradise that became forbidden. A holiday destination that became a wound. A place built for visitors that nobody could visit. A city with some of the most valuable coastline in the region, sitting silent for decades. People called it a ghost town. But Varosha was not only a ghost town, it was a political scar. One of the most haunting ideas about Varosha is not only that people left, it is what they left behind. Abandoned places become powerful because they preserve the outline of human life. A chair, a table, a shop window, a hotel corridor, a staircase, a balcony, a street corner. None of these things are dramatic by themselves. But when the people are gone, ordinary objects become emotional. They become evidence. Evidence that life was real. Evidence that the city was not always silent. Evidence that someone planned to return. In Varosha, the abandoned hotels became some of the most powerful symbols. High-rise buildings stood near the coast, facing the sea. They were designed for views, comfort, tourism, and pleasure. But once the city was closed, those same buildings became monuments to absence. Rows of balconies without guests, windows without curtains, rooms without voices, pools without swimmers, lobbies without footsteps, restaurants without meals. The beach kept changing with every season, but the city stayed trapped. That contrast is brutal. Nature moves, the sea moves, the sun moves, wind moves, but the city remains stuck in the moment after departure. Over the years, nature began to take back parts of Varosha. Plants pushed through cracks. Trees grew where people once walked. Birds nested in forgotten places. Dust settled over interiors. The boundary between city and wilderness blurred. This is one reason abandoned places fascinate people so much. They show us what happens when human order disappears. A resort is one of the most controlled environments humans create. Everything is designed for comfort: lighting, rooms, pools, restaurants, views, paths to the beach. But without maintenance, the illusion collapses. Luxury becomes fragile. A hotel can look powerful when full of people. But remove the people, remove electricity, remove cleaning, remove care, and the building begins to reveal how temporary everything is. Varosha became a lesson in how quickly glamour can become decay. The same balconies that once promised leisure began to look like empty eye sockets. The same hotels that once sold escape began to become part of a trapped landscape. The same streets that once carried tourists became corridors of memory. And behind every building was a human question. Who had to leave this place? And what did they lose when they did? When people first hear about Varosha, they often ask a simple question. Why did they not just reopen it? Why leave valuable hotels empty for decades? Why allow buildings to rot beside a beautiful beach? Why not let people return? But Varosha is not a simple, abandoned town. It sits inside one of the most complicated political situations in Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. Cyprus has been divided since 1974. For Greek Cypriots who fled Varosha, the place is tied to loss, displacement, property, memory, and the right to return. For Turkish Cypriots in Turkey, the area is connected to security, control, negotiations, and competing political claims. For the international community, Varosha became a symbol of unresolved conflict. The United Nations has addressed Varosha in resolutions and statements. The idea that the area should not simply be settled by people other than its original inhabitants became part of the international position. That is why Varosha is not just about empty buildings. It is about ownership, memory, law, recognition, return, security, and decades of failed negotiations. A normal abandoned hotel can be sold. A normal ghost town can be photographed. A normal old district can be redeveloped. But Varosha is not normal. Every street carries a legal and emotional question. Every building may have an owner who fled. Every hotel may represent a family, a business, an investment, a life interrupted. To one person, a building might look like an opportunity. To another, it is stolen time. To another, it is evidence. To another, it is a bargaining chip. That is why the city stayed frozen for so long. Because reopening it was never only about roads, electricity, water, or construction. It was about the larger Cyprus problem. It was about whether the past could be repaired without creating a new injustice. And that is why Varosha's silence became louder with time. The longer it remained closed, the more symbolic it became. It was no longer just a district. It was a reminder of what had not been solved. A place where politics could be seen in concrete, glass, sand, and rust. After decades of closure, parts of Varosha were open to visitors. This changed the story again. For years, Varosha was almost mythical. People saw it from outside. They heard stories. They saw photos taken from a distance. They imagined hotel rooms frozen in 1974. They imagined streets swallowed by plants. They imagined an entire resort city locked away behind barriers. Then, when parts of the area were opened, people could finally walk through some of it. But walking through Varosha does not make the story simple. It may even make it more complicated. Because seeing an abandoned place up close can create two very different reactions. For some visitors, it is fascinating, a strange tourist experience, a rare ghost town by the sea, a place that looks cinematic, eerie, and unreal. For former residents and their families, it can be painful. This was not built as a theme park. It was not designed to be a curiosity. It was home. It was property. It was memory. It was a life interrupted. That tension is powerful. A visitor may see a ruined hotel and think it is beautiful in a dark way. A former resident may see the same building and remember a street full of people, a shop, a school, a home, a summer, a childhood, a family business, a key that no longer opens anything. This is the danger of ghost town tourism. When a place becomes famous for being abandoned, people can forget why it was abandoned. They can turn suffering into scenery. They can turn displacement into atmosphere. They can turn unresolved conflict into a photo opportunity. Varosha resists that. It is too political, too recent, too personal, too unresolved. It is not ancient enough to feel safely distant. It is not empty enough to feel anonymous. The people who left and the children of those people still carry the memory. That is why Varosha is not just a place to look at. It is a place that asks viewers to think carefully about what they are seeing. An empty hotel is not only an aesthetic image, it is a wound with windows. Varosha fascinates people because it combines two opposite images: luxury and abandonment, beach and barrier, summer and silence, holiday and exile. Most ghost towns are associated with harshness: mining towns, desert towns, industrial towns, toxic towns. Places people left because the work disappeared, the land became unsafe, or the economy collapsed. But Varosha was different. It was not a poor, forgotten settlement in the middle of nowhere. It was a valuable resort district beside the sea. It was modern, it was profitable, it was desirable. That makes the abandonment feel almost impossible. How can a place built for pleasure become forbidden? How can hotels beside perfect water stand empty for 50 years? How can a city with such valuable land be left to decay? The answer is that not all ruins are created by nature. Some are created by politics. Some are created by war. Some are created by borders. Some are created by unresolved history. Varosha is a reminder that a city can be physically present and socially absent. The buildings can stand, the roads can remain, the sea can still shine, but the life of the city can be gone. And that is one of the strangest forms of disappearance. A destroyed city is gone because it has been physically broken. A flooded city is gone because water covers it. A burned city is gone because fire consumes it. But Varosha is gone in another way. It is there. You can see it. You can walk through parts of it. You can photograph the buildings. You can stand near the beach. And still, the city that once existed is unreachable. The old Varosha is not just behind a fence, it is behind time, behind conflict, behind memory, behind decisions that were never resolved. That is why the story stays with people. It is not only spooky, it is sad, it is beautiful, it is political, it is human. And it forces us to ask a question that is difficult to answer. When a city is frozen for decades, what does it become? A ruin? A memorial? A warning? A bargaining chip? A tourist attraction? Or a home still waiting for the people who lost it? Varosha began as a dream of the Mediterranean future, a place of beaches, hotels, balconies, summer nights, bright windows, crowded streets, tourists arriving with suitcases, families building lives beside the sea. It was a city designed for movement, pleasure, and growth. Then, almost overnight, everything stopped. The people left. The streets emptied, the hotels closed, the fences went up, and time began working on the city in silence. For decades, the sea remained beautiful, but the resort beside it became a ghost. That is what makes Varosha so haunting. It was not destroyed in one dramatic instant. It was suspended. A city paused in the middle of life. A place where the future was interrupted. A place where people thought they would return, and history said no. Today, Varosha is still more than an abandoned resort. It is a reminder that some places are not lost because they are forgotten. Some places are lost because the world cannot agree on how to return them. And in that unresolved space, buildings decay, streets empty, memories harden. Nature takes root. Tourists look through fences. Former residents remember keys, rooms, balconies, and streets that no longer belong to daily life. Some towns disappear underwater. Some burn underground. Some are poisoned by the dust they created. But Varosha became something else. A resort city that did not die completely. A city that stayed visible, but unreachable. A city where paradise turned into a boundary, and where the sound of waves continued beside empty hotels for half a century. This is Varosha, the resort city abandoned overnight, the beach that kept shining, and the ghost town that history still has not finished with.